our Agile conference here. So how was it till now? Okay, I like that. And we are very happy that we can now have somebody here from the other side of the ocean. It's my pleasure to announce Linda Rising, an independent consultant from Nashville, who has already written 4 books and numerous articles, is an international speaker, and she doesn't have to leave her home to give us her insights. She will speak about trees. What's very interesting, because the pandemic was a global thing, so she also had to be to do some things, and she went outside, went to nature, and it seems, as I read it from this description, she noticed that nature is doing something with her. And so she's a researcher and seems to be like a curious mind, and she went more into depth and discovered the secret agile behavior of trees. Let's see what's the magic behind there. So thank you very much, Linda, for being with us. I will get muted, and now it's your time to inspire us with whatever trees you found on the planet Earth.
Thank you so much. I hope that I'm not an echo. Actually, I can hear myself as an echo, but all right, that's better. And I hope you can see my slides. And if I move forward, you can see the next slide. Yes, that looks good. Okay, so this is a presentation that I created during the pandemic. And I've given it several times. I keep changing it. I'm not totally happy with it, but you'll notice that none of the slides have copyright. And if you think this was an interesting presentation and you would like to share it with your colleagues or your family, I'm happy to send it to you. You have my email address on the very first slide. And if you have questions that come up, I hope at the end we'll have time for questions. But if you think of any tomorrow, next week, next month, I'm happy to answer any questions. I've learned a lot about trees and Agile. And of course, let's connect on LinkedIn. So you might have noticed, if you didn't know already, that I'm incredibly old. In fact, this year, I became 80 years old. So I celebrated my 80th birthday. And I often get the question, well, Linda, you're still working, you're still doing lots of things. How is it? What's your secret? And I have to say, I don't know. Perhaps I'm just lucky, who knows? But if I were going to identify one secret sauce, it would be exercise. I have always believed in the importance of exercise. I have always believed that I should spend a certain amount of time, even if I'm traveling, a certain amount of time exercising. And for me, that means going to the gym, making sure that I have balanced approach to exercise. I do a lot of weight bearing, a lot of cardiovascular. And as you know, when the pandemic hit, this was impossible, at least in my neighborhood. All the gyms were closed. No one could go work out, do that nice balanced exercise. So what to do? If this is the secret and I believe in it, what should I do when I can't go to the gym? Well, I live in a wonderful community that's surrounded by an interesting trail that goes through a little forest. And so my husband and I decided we should just go for a walk. We have miles and miles of walking trails. We were able to log over 4 miles a day. walking around through some beautiful country here in Middle Tennessee. And we could see lots of things going on even in the winter. So yes, go in the cold, go in the rain. I know we don't have much of a winter here in Tennessee, but it gets pretty chilly. So I had to dig out my outfit that I last wore in Moscow. We got lots of deer. In fact, maybe too many deer. And lots of rabbits. This is a fox. It's a vixen. She has babies. She lives almost in our backyard. And she had 3 babies in the early 2020s. We got to watch them grow up. We have lots of birds. We have owls. We have eagles. And of course, we have lots and lots of trees. And as we were spending time walking, I realized I don't really know a lot about trees. You probably know I have a PhD in computer science. You might not know that I started out life as a chemist and then I became a mathematician. It's always been technical for me, and it's always been physical science, not biological. I don't know a lot about trees, plants, animals. So I thought I should do a little research. Spending all this time, I should learn a little bit more about trees. I discovered something interesting. If you look at the roots of plants of any kind, this includes trees, you will see a network of root systems. All of plants have this, but what I didn't know is attached to the roots is another kind of organism. The roots extend into the ground, yes, we know that, but the roots are attached to an organism that is a fungus. Now, a fungus is not a plant. It is not an animal. It is its own separate kingdom, its own kind of living thing. And it's attached to the roots of all plants, and it lives entirely underground. Now, this fungus that lives underground extends for miles and miles and miles in all directions and acts as a, well, we could call it a web, an underground web that connects the plants, the trees, in an underground connective network that we can't see. Those of us who live above the ground, we can see the trees, of course, and we would have the illusion that the trees stand alone, that they have no connection, that they have no communication, that they have no way of reacting to their environment. And the primary lesson I learned in 2020 is that our view of trees is wrong. And the secret lies in this fungus, that because the trees have roots, and the roots are connected to the fungus, and the fungus is connected to, well, the next tree, and the next tree, and the next plant. In fact, all of the plants are connected by this fungus, and that allows these trees to be agile. In my research, I had to go all the way back to the first major article where this connection was established by science. If you dig up a forest, you can see it. But no one had really scientifically investigated how extensive this network was and what the trees use it to connect to each other, to communicate. This is a rather technical article, but if you can't find it and you'd like to read it, I'll be happy to send it to you. Just send me some email. It was published in a very prestigious journal called Nature in 1997. And on the cover of that issue, the editors of Nature were so impressed with the scientific research that showed very clearly that there is an enormous underground network that allows the trees to communicate, that they called it the Wood Wide Web. Now, at the time, the internet was, well, just taking off, and so it was, a little parody on what the network was for the internet, saying there is also a network that we can't see, a network underground that allows the same kind of communication as the internet, that it allows all the plants and all the trees in the forest to share information, communicate needs, to collaborate, to grow, to learn. To me, that sounds very agile. I was also fortunate that in early 2021, a brand new book came out, which I encourage you to read if you'd like to learn more about trees. The book is called Finding the Mother Tree, and it was written by a scientist, Suzanne Simard. She's the author of that article in Nature. And this book is the story of how she, as a scientist, changed her view about what trees can do. It's also a story about her adventure as a scientist, as a woman scientist in a male-dominated field, which is the study of forestry. I can certainly resonate with that. So if you're interested in trees, this is one of many books I discovered. You probably have several on your own list, and I know you have too many books to read, but this one is fascinating. What she found was this enormous network, miles and miles of connections that allow the trees to, well, to be connected, to be part of you could call it a community, to work together, to help each other, to support each other. It was astounding research because the foresters knew, of course, that this fungus was there. They had dug it up, they had seen it. But they didn't know how powerful the network was. They didn't know that one tree could reach out to a neighboring tree and ask for help. They didn't know that large, older trees could help younger trees who might be struggling, and send them the nutrients, the sugars, whatever it was that they needed. The foresters had no idea that this intricate, elaborate, involved communication was going on between trees. So let's remember a little bit of our high school science, because we know that plants survive by doing something called photosynthesis. They take carbon dioxide from the air, and with sunlight as a catalyst, they convert the carbon in the carbon dioxide into a carbohydrate, a sugar. And they need that. That's their food. That's how they build parts of the body of the various plants. But that is not enough. If plants only had the carbon from carbon dioxide, they would not survive. Plants also need a lot of things that are in the ground, a lot of minerals, magnesium, potassium, and their roots are not structured so that they can pull those minerals out of the ground. It's impossible for them to survive without those minerals, and yet their structure does not allow them to extract those minerals from the earth. Enter the fungus. The fungus is very good at extracting minerals. In fact, fungus also does a lot of interesting things. A fungus can mine in the sense of going after pockets of minerals. The fungus has a certain kind of intelligence that allows it to find the kinds of minerals that the plants need. Now, the fungus is fine with minerals, but it doesn't have any access to sunlight or carbon dioxide, so it doesn't make sugar. It doesn't make the carbohydrates that it needs. So what we have as a gift from evolution is the cooperation between fungus underground that produces minerals and plants above ground that produce carbohydrate. They share, they exchange, they react to each other, and each allows the other to survive. The plant provides carbohydrate to the fungus provides minerals to the tree. And they do it by communicating. What Suzanne Simard was able to show with radioactive carbon dating is that the tree will say to the fungus, hey, I need some more magnesium. Can you help me? And the fungus will say, sure, I'll send you all the magnesium you need. And oh, by the way, I'd like to have some carbohydrate. Can you send some of that down to me? So again, before Suzanne's work, the foresters had no idea that this kind of delicate balancing, the exchange of needs, the cooperation, the communication, I had no idea that this was happening. So the trees are not only communicating with each other through the fungus, they're also along the way communicating with the fungus underground. And if they did not have this communication network, there would be no trees. The trees need the fungus to survive, and the fungus needs the tree. So we don't want to attribute altruism or goodness or ethics. We're talking about survival. The survival of organisms that have evolved much longer than we have been in this evolutionary game to survive by cooperating, to survive by helping each other. Well, I thought that was interesting, but I thought, I know, I feel better. There's something about being in the forest. I'm wondering, and I'm hearing an echo right now, so I'm wondering about that. I'm wondering, the trees are obviously helping each other. I wonder if the trees are helping us. Ah, that's good. That's good. No echo now. Thank you. Let's see. The first little research study I found was done in Europe. It looked at a hospital where patients recovering from surgery were randomly assigned to one room with a window that looked out on green trees, or another window that looked out on a brick wall. Now, intuitively, we would look at this experiment and we would say, well, yes, we feel that probably the patients in the room with the window that looks out on the trees, probably that would be better. We would feel better. We would be happier. Whereas looking out on a brick wall, well, that's not so nice. But what had not been measured before this experiment was, is there any real measurable benefit? I often wonder that about Agile. We know we feel better. We have a sense, an intuition that things are better. But what we really need is some serious science that shows us a measurable benefit. I believe some people are working on that, but we don't really have it yet. This study showed clear, measurable, statistically significant differences. It's not just, oh, well, we feel better. No, we can measure the amount of medication that people took, whether they were in a room with a window that looked out on a tree or a room with a window that looked out on a brick wall. And you can see, you can measure that those patients who were able to see trees didn't require as much pain medication, didn't require as much anxiety medication, didn't have as many side effects, nausea, constipation, depression. Those who were in the rooms with the windows that looked out on the trees didn't stay as long for their recovery. So when I saw that first small study, I wondered about all the people I knew in 2020 who were at home staring at a screen all day. It's not exactly a brick wall, but pretty close. And I wonder, are you still staring at that screen? You are right now, aren't you? I found another study about families who live in low-income housing. This was done in Chicago. When these miserable homes were built, it was to solve a problem that still exists. Unfortunately, it was not a good solution. These apartment buildings did have trees originally. They had a little park, not much really. But for many of the buildings over time, well, the children and other people played on the grass and the grass died, and they climbed the trees and the trees fell over and the trees died. And so finally the managers of the apartment building said, let's just pave that over. Let's cover it with asphalt. So now there are no trees. So this was a field experiment, a natural experiment. Some of these apartment buildings randomly had no trees at all, and others still had the original trees. Not a lot of green space. In fact, so little that you wouldn't think it would have any impact at all. What would be the effect of having 1 or 2 small trees and a little bit of grass? Would that be significant? And the answer, of course, since I'm talking about it, would be yes. Clear differences in those 2 kinds of buildings. Clear differences in how the neighbors reacted to other neighbors, how safe they felt, whether they even had conversations with their neighbors, whether they would depend on them to look out for their children. And then they went to the Chicago Police Department and they looked up crime records, and they found statistically significant differences in the rates of aggression, robbery, murder in the 2 kinds of buildings. Such amazing differences, all because of a couple of trees. Psychologists call this attention restoration theory. We as humans need to look at green things, especially trees. And when we don't, we have measurable deficiencies in our abilities to do, well, all the things that you do all day. Diminished ability to pay attention, solve problems, come up with creative ideas. We don't do as well. We don't think as well. We're not as happy. We're more depressed and anxious. It's called mental fatigue. Nature has the power, much more so than, well, for those who take drugs, much more so than drugs. Nature restores. This is attention restoration. Nature restores. And it's not, again, just intuition or feeling. We have scientific evidence now that if you don't have a chance to just look at a natural setting, at a green setting, you don't do as well. It's been measured. We get creativity boosts by spending time in nature. Our blood pressure goes down. Our stress is reduced. We just feel better and we are happier. Crime goes down. Cooperation goes up. We have evolved to spend time in nature. And even now that most of us live in cities, we do better when we have a chance to be with trees. One of the most active research groups now is at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. One of the lead researchers there is a woman named Frances Kuo. And I liked her statement. She said, when I started this research, I would have said, well, of course, trees are nice. Who doesn't like trees? Who doesn't like nature? But I wondered, we've got a lot of problems in the world today. Maybe concentrating on trees, well, this is kind of a nice to have, but I don't know whether it's worth it or not. But now that I've done the research, I am convinced trees are such an important part of what it means to be human, that without this connection to nature, we're very different. So in a way, the solution to all those other problems might depend upon whether we solve this one, whether we solve the problem that many people are not having a chance to spend time with trees. Well, what if you live in a city like Chicago, where all you have is a little park and a couple of trees. Well, that's it. You don't have miles and miles and miles of walking trails. It's just a couple of trees and a few bushes. And yeah, there's some green there, but not very much. Is there any research that could help us with that? And the answer is yes. Even just going to a park, and if you have children, this is even more important. Just once a week visiting a park results in less depression, lowered blood pressure, reduced stress, and measurable improvements in the development of children. We are so worried about our children. How will they, in the long run, survive this time when things were upside down and so different? And the answer is one step in the right direction would be to make sure that they have a chance to be in a green space at least once a week. This is not a major investment. Spending an hour, just 1 hour, measurable improvements in memory, attention, creativity. Even if the weather is bad, it doesn't have to be a beautiful day. And this improvement is compared with people who did go outside, but did not see green. People who did go outside, but only saw urban environments with no trees. So it's not just about being outside. It's about being outside with some green. A tree, one tree, makes a huge difference. Those of us who are concerned about the tech industry, there's a history with trees. We know Steve Jobs used to spend a lot of time walking in Palo Alto, which has enormous tree-lined streets. He did a lot of early development for Pixar by walking outside. I have a famous quote that I use in another presentation, Steve Jobs going into someone's office and saying, "Let's go for a walk." Jeff Bezos, before he started Amazon, spent a lot of time walking in Central Park, an oasis in the middle of New York City, full of trees. Hours and hours debating, was this online bookstore going to be a good idea? LinkedIn CEO Jeff Weiner spends a lot of time walking. He has something called walking meetings. He will walk with one or two others and have the meeting outside and have the meeting while we're moving in Mountain View, California. And the list goes on and on. One of the problems with Western science and its look at science and evolution is that it thinks about individuals. And somehow groups of people, groups of animals get short shrift. We're not really looking at communities. But what we know is all individuals, well, this is an important part of Agile, isn't it? We're part of a community. We talk a lot about teams and how people work together. So we haven't really looked at the benefits of being together, the evolutionary, biological benefits, what it means to our survival to be with others. Certainly during the time of the pandemic, we felt that. We could only connect online, and that is so limited. I don't want to denigrate it too much, because think what life would have been like without Zoom or Teams or any of the other products that allowed us to communicate. But at the same time, we saw clearly the shortcomings. So we should know, we should realize the importance of connection for our survival, for our evolutionary benefit. We now can see it. The trees are exhibiting clear evidence that being connected is what it takes for us to survive successfully. Now we know we're believers in science. Back in the day, I can remember decades ago, the promise was, well, we're all going to be working shorter weeks. Oh yeah. All these wonderful gadgets and technological innovations, they're going to make our lives easier. And they have not. Most of us spend all day staring at a screen of some kind. The mental health problems in adults and children. We have anxiety, depression. We're not sleeping well. Burnout, stress, unhappiness are increasing. This was a horrifying statistic to me. American and Canadian consumers buy more than 12 tons of anti-anxiety medication, 7 tons of sleeping pills, 150 tons of antidepressants. We're not better. Technology is not helping us. So one last experiment. Let's go to London. There are neighborhoods in London, neighborhood pharmacies, neighborhood parks in some cases. And it's pretty easy to measure. We know for a given neighborhood where the pharmacy is, who uses the pharmacy. We know if there's a park, a little bit of green or not. And so it's a natural field experiment that showed very clearly that the amount of medication prescribed for mood change, anti-anxiety, anti-depression, sleeping medication, was clearly related to the amount of green space. The less green in the neighborhood, the greater the number of prescriptions. So a clear correlation, inverse, but a clear correlation between the amount of green space and the amount of drugs that people in that neighborhood were taking. We know it's about health then, isn't it? Being a healthy person, being a healthy tree. We're better, not just for survival, but along the way, for our health's sake, for our mental health, for our physical health, for our spiritual health. We're better. Well, now we know there are those connections underground. That fungus allows all the trees to talk to one another. But Suzanne found something even more interesting. She did a map of the connections between the trees in a section of the forest, and she found that some trees are connected to almost every other tree, whereas others, well, they're all connected, of course, but so you can see in this graph, the larger the node and the darker, the more connection. So there are a few that are really large and really dark. Those trees are connected to every other tree in the forest. The others, well, not so much. Some of those are smaller, lighter colored. Well, they're all connected, of course, but they're not connected to as many other trees. And in this discovery, she found that those trees that have the most connections are the old trees, the ones that have been around for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So she calls those the mother trees. Now, trees don't have a gender, so you could also call them the father trees, but they look after. They are the parents, in a way, of all the other trees, and they make sure that if they need something, do you need some more sugar? You're not getting enough sunlight, so you can't make enough carbohydrate. I can send you some. Do you need more minerals? I'll give you minerals. I have some extra magnesium. I can send that to you. They look after the youngsters, just as we do, just as we take care of our own children, just as we take care of the younger people in our community. They do seem to favor their own species, but yes, an oak tree will help an oak tree. It knows that it's an oak tree, but an oak tree will also help an elm, a pine, a spruce. And when the old trees die, the last thing they do is send everything to the other young trees that need it. Now, this is a hard message for people who are in the forestry industry because they like to come in and clear cut down everything, and they regard the old trees as, well, some of them they've been around for so long, let's just get rid of them. And Suzanne's message is, no, these are the trees that are connected to every other tree. These are the trees that take care of, that support, that watch out for the younger trees. We need to keep them around. Leave the old trees and then go ahead and plant. And you'll find that the old trees will help the younger ones. The result will be better. Trees have a different timeline. This is the oldest tree on the face of the earth. Its name is Methuselah, very appropriate, I think. It's been around for 5,000 years. 5,000 years. What has that tree seen? What has that tree learned? What has that tree been able to do to help the other young trees around it? I think it's probably learned a lot. So for me, what I learned about trees and walking, I learned that, yes, I'm a fan of exercise, and of course I'm a fan of walking. I talk about it all the time, the benefits of walking, but I was a snob. I was an exercise snob. I regarded walking as, well, it's nice, but that's not real exercise. And I was wrong. So I mentioned I'm incredibly old, but I don't have health problems except for one. I've never really weighed a lot, and so I suffer from osteoporosis. My bones are deteriorating. And that is a serious problem for old people, both men and women. And I could see, as a scientist, my doctor was very open about sharing numbers with me, and I could see my numbers were going down. And finally, she said, you must start taking medication. We don't want your bones to deteriorate any further. And I resisted for a long time, but finally I agreed. Now, the medication does not increase your bone density. It just keeps it from deteriorating further. So during the pandemic, when I started walking, I thought, oh, this is really bad. I'm not going to be able to lift weights. I'm not going to do my balanced exercise routine. Probably I will pay in my bone density. So I was very surprised when in 2021, I got a call from my internist and she said, Linda, I'm looking at your numbers for your bone density and I don't understand it, but the numbers are getting better. Now, remember, the medication does not do that. It keeps things from getting worse, but it doesn't improve your bone density. My physician said, what are you doing? What are you doing differently? I couldn't think of anything except I'm out walking with the trees. Maybe the trees are helping me. So she said, your numbers are so good, I think we can stop the medication. So for me, my own personal experience with being with the trees, I saw measurable benefit. And I also realized that, oh, I'm kind of a mother tree. I do everything I can to help the younger people, to make their lives a little easier if I can. But then I have to realize at some point, I won't be able to do that any longer. So then what? So my husband and I did some investigation and we found Nature Conservancy has a green burial site not too far from us where there is no embalming, no coffin, nothing artificial. You are simply wrapped in a beautiful linen shroud, and you become a tree. I think I want to be a red maple. So what can you do? Number one, and do it today, please, go outside. You don't have to stay very long if it's raining or cold or horrible or windy, but go outside. Go outside every day. Go outside and look at something green every day. Try to structure a walking meeting if you can. Instead of staying inside, see if you can go outside. Even during the pandemic, walking outside was okay. There was the feeling that if you were outside, you didn't have to worry about wearing a mask or talking to one another. Having pictures, videos, screensavers of nature, well, that's a good thing. But unfortunately, the benefit is very small. It's actually zero. We may think that looking at a picture of a tree is a good thing, but it actually has no benefit. You need real plants if you can have plants inside. But if you can't go outside, the next best thing is just go to a window, find a window where you can go and look outside just for a few minutes. Make it a priority. It's good for you. It's good for your brain. It's good for your children. You will be better. I'm a fan of technology, even though it's not always helping us. And here is a perfect example of that. This is a giant creation. It has a name that I kind of like. It's called Orca. It costs $10 million. Its job is to take carbon dioxide from the air to try to eliminate the problems of climate change. It removes the carbon and it buries it in the ground. Now, people who don't like this say, this costs too much money. It doesn't really do a very effective job. But when I read about it, I thought, don't we already have Don't we already have a mechanism for taking carbon dioxide from the air and removing the carbon and storing it? I think we do. I think they're called trees. Wouldn't it be better if we did a better job of taking better care of the trees instead of investing a huge amount on a technology solution? What do you think? I hope you got the message. We're all hooked together. The trees are trying to show me that in 2020. The trees are trying to tell me this is how you do it. This is success. If you want to know about Agile, it's there. The trees are trying to teach us. The trees are trying to teach us that this is how we've evolved. If you need some proof about collaboration, communication, being connected, it's all around you. It's in the forest. The message is clear. We have evolved to be together. We have evolved to work in little groups and cooperate and share and support one another. I haven't even begun to tell you what I've learned about trees. And the most exciting part takes the longest to really understand, but trees also learn and they react. They share information about what they've learned. This is a perfect biological example of what true agility is and why it works and why we are attracted to it and why we're so successful when we follow the precepts. We're just in the early stages. Trees have been at this for tens of thousands of years. So maybe we should pay attention to the lessons from the trees. The first time I gave this talk, I got an interesting email from a young lady who said, I've worked at home since COVID. I have 2 windows in my office. I sat with the blinds of both windows closed for 2 years. But that changed after I listened to you. And now my first course of action is to open the blinds when I come in and look at my backyard, trees, and green throughout the day. I occasionally even get a visit from a couple of deer. Thank you. So I asked her, would you send me a picture? Send me a picture of what it looked like before and after. So here's what it looked like before. She sat in her office for 2 years, staring at a wall of sorts, staring at her blinds. And then she discovered something just outside her window. All the green, the trees, and yes, there's a deer paying a visit. Do you think if we could measure that, would it make a difference in the quality of her performance, in her ability to solve problems, in her level of anxiety and depression? It's so easy to look at this example and say, well, oh, obviously she should have been doing this before. It would have helped her. What are you doing? What are you staring at? What blinds are still closed in your life? What blinds can you open and be better? Well, if you want to know what Suzanne Simard is up to do now is you can look at her project. It's called the Mother Tree Project. Just go and learn about all the amazing things she is still doing. And of course, this is a talk about trees, but it's so much more. It's about how things, living things, are connected and have community and work together. So I hope it's been interesting. And maybe if you have some questions, I'm going to stop sharing and see if you have any questions for me. I know you're going to have to mute or unmute or do whatever you need to do. So thank you.
It's the right button. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much for your inspiring talk. And yeah. I don't really need to say much. I think you can hear the clapping. So who has questions for Linda Rising? I know it's a new topic. For me, it was new to think about trees and the connection to agility. Here.
My question is, so the trees are very peaceful, but is there also competitiveness between trees?
That's a good question because the forestry industry believed in competition. And it was one of the biggest battles that Suzanne Simard had to fight. Because the forestry industry, the entire industry, believed that trees compete with each other. And so if you're not careful, then the trees will get in each other's way and they will prevent the new trees, the saplings, the young trees. They will keep them from surviving if they are of a different species. That oak trees, in other words, would compete with spruce, or that pine would compete with elm. That was the model that the forestry industry believed. And what Suzanne had to prove was they do not compete. They help each other. An oak tree will help a pine seedling. A spruce is better if it is surrounded by other trees of other species. And in fact, since the trees have different needs at different times, they know that and they work together. So some trees grow faster in the spring, some grow faster in the fall. They help each other at their times of need. So if you're really growing fast in the spring, the other trees around you will send you extra food. And then when their trees grow in the fall, the spring growing trees will send food to those trees. They work together. So yes, that's what we used to believe about trees, that they did not cooperate, that they were in conflict. But it's not true. They work together. They help each other.
Observations of teams. Can we observe teams in the forest? Just following the comparison between the Agile network and the forest network?
So there weren't teams. What there were specific nodes that were connected to more people. So the mother trees, the old trees, were connected to more people than the younger ones. But there weren't small groups of 6 or 8 that worked together. So if you're looking for a topological mapping of every element of software flavored Agile into the trees, you're not going to find teams. But what you are going to find is something that we don't have that we might have, which is this notion that we're all connected and that there are some in the community, the old trees, who are connected to more people, and we should take advantage of that. That's a more natural network than breaking up into small teams. I don't have an answer for that, but I'm just saying we should think about it.
Okay, and one last question from the online. We're already a little bit past our time. Randy Rangel is asking, how did you get to this relationship between agility and trees?
I'm always looking for connections. And so, of course, Suzanne Simard's book didn't have anything about Agile. She doesn't know anything about Agile software development, but I do. And I'm a product of what I have learned. So when I see something new, then I map it onto what I have already learned. So I'm interested in Agile, I'm interested in patterns. And so when I see something new, that's intuitively what I look for. But the more you read about what trees do, the more you see how clear it is that they are agile. And it's so surprising because we look at a tree and we think that tree can't go anywhere. It's obviously in place, it doesn't move. So how could it be agile? And the answer is pretty clear. Because it's connected to all the other plants in the area, it can be very agile.
Okay, thank you very much.
Y'all be safe.